Hello, my name is Leonard, and this is the Symantec Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration, Lesson 10, Configuring Journal Archiving. We've been dealing with mailbox archiving up to this particular point. We're now ready to look at a special mailbox type, which is a journal mailbox. So we're going to go through and look at the differences between the mailbox archiving and the journal archiving. However, because it is a mailbox, there are a lot of similarities. So in this lesson, we're going to go through and do an overview of what's involved in the Exchange journaling environment and how we're going to archive those Exchange journal mailboxes. And then we'll look at how we're setting up and configuring the Exchange journal archiving. So first, let's do an overview of Exchange journal archiving. Now, again, the big thing to point out here is that Exchange is doing the journaling. And as part of that journaling process, they're going to store whatever they journal into a mailbox. And then what we're going to do in Enterprise Vault is archive that mailbox. So why do we need to archive journal items? This is to manage the large amount of data that's going to exist in a journal. Again, based upon how you have journal archiving configured, you can configure all the way from everything down to very selective items for journaling. So if you do go through, say, for either your compliance regulations or for electronic discovery, you need to basically save everything that goes through your Exchange environment. You can see how this could become a very large amount of data in a very short amount of time. Now, not only do you need to be able to keep track of all this information, but you also want to be able to search it. If it is going to be used for compliance or a discovery type of a situation, you need to be able to retrieve those journal items and find them readily. Also, you may need to monitor the mail as it actually comes in or goes out for the compliance reasons as well. So kind of an overview of the Exchange journaling process. Here we are showing an Exchange mail server. We're going to be having different users inside of our Exchange organization. Our Exchange users, such as user A, user B, and user C, are going to have mailboxes, and they're going to send and receive mail messages. So I have messages going in and out of the Exchange server from user A, as well as receiving messages from users outside of our organization coming into our organization for those particular users. So the idea of setting up a journaling mailbox and to have journaling occur on the Exchange server is that a copy of these items sent and or received can be placed in this journal mailbox. And again, we just want to reinforce this idea that the actual journaling itself is being controlled and is configured by the Exchange environment, not Enterprise Vault. What we control and configure is the archiving process of archiving that Exchange mailbox. Now, speaking of this, one of the things that we need to look at is the different types of journaling that is supported on an Exchange environment. This is going to have an impact not only in the Exchange environment as far as determining what is going to be journaled, but also in our Enterprise Vault as far as what information we're going to be able to index. And based upon what information we're able to index is going to determine what information you're going to be able to search upon. So therefore, we start off with the concepts of standard journaling and premium journaling. In standard journaling, the messages that are sent to and from recipients and senders located on a specific mailbox database on a computer rubbing the hub transport option. And this is one of the roles that's available in your Exchange environment is the hub transport role. So you set up what's called a journaling rule in Exchange to determine these items that are going to be journaled. Then you can have the premium version, which meets the same requirements as the standard, but also you can go through and configure more specific rules. You can do things such as a per recipient, per group type of a journaling, selective journaling to control exactly individuals that are having items journaled. Also, you have the capability of the scope, whether or not it's for an individual domain or multiple domains in your Exchange organization. And also, you have the capability, once you've created these particular rules, of moving them around between multiple Exchange environments, which is the journaling rule replication. And all that is supported by the premium environment. Now, when you're setting and talking about using premium journaling, it's only going to be available to you if you do, in fact, have the enterprise client licenses for your Exchange environment to support the premium journaling. Now, the next thing we need to look at as far as journaling types are based upon the version of Exchange that you're working with. So So we're going to start off with the Exchange 2003 environment, and this is going to be for actually technically Exchange 2000 Service Pack 3 and Exchange 2003 Service Pack 1 and beyond supports the types of journaling we're going to talk about. The first is called standard journaling. This default setting only records the individual recipients. The standard journaling is sometimes referred to as message-only journaling, and in the Exchange 2003 environment, you can only set up journaling based upon an individual database. So you can't have different settings on the individual mailboxes themselves. You're setting this up based upon the mailbox database. The next type of journaling that is supported on an Exchange 2003 environment is called BCC, or blind carbon copy journaling, which captures the blind carbon copy information as well as the standard recipients. And when we talk about standard recipients, that would be anyone that was in the to or from, as well as the carbon copy properties. The last type of journaling that's supported in the Exchange 2003 type of environment is called envelope journaling. And for the envelope journaling, it captures all the SMTP recipients of a message, it captures all the members of a distribution group, and it will also capture the messaging application programming interface, or the MAPI reports. Now typically, if you're going to be setting up your Exchange environment for journaling, and you know that you're going to be using a compliance accelerator or discovery accelerator add-on for Enterprise Vault, you really should set up the envelope journaling, because that gives you the most information that's going to be able to be indexed in the Enterprise Vault archiving process, which means it's going to give you the most information that you're going to be able to use for searching for both compliance and accelerator. To set up the BCC journaling, you make a registry change in the Exchange environment to turn that on. And just a warning, if you do make that registry change to turn on the BCC journaling or the blind carbon copy, that will disable the envelope journaling. So if your expectation is to have the envelope journaling, you can't go through and turn on the BCC journaling feature with the registry. Now, moving on to a combination of looking at what would happen if we had envelope journaling turned on, or what's called standard journaling in a Exchange 2007 or 2010 environment. This is showing you what a journal message looks like. You can see in this particular example, we have the from and to fields. We also have the carbon copy fields that are displayed. It does display the subject of the original message. And what it does is it takes the original message itself and turns it into a attachment to the journal message. So what actually gets journaled is the sender and recipient information, as well as a message ID. And again, as long as we're using envelope journaling in Exchange 2003, which is equivalent to the standard journaling in Exchange 2007 and 2010, we should be able to search on all this information, because all of this information will be indexed. So let's look at the idea of doing a journal archive. So with the journal archiving, again, you will go through and see all the different things that need to be configured to set up journal archiving here in a moment. But once we have all that set up, you have a journal mailbox on the Exchange server, and the Enterprise Vault environment will have installed a hidden message in that journal mailbox, just like it did for the regular mailbox archiving that we talked about in an earlier lesson. However, now, instead of using a mailbox archiving task to archive that mailbox, we're going to have a separate task. This is called an Exchange journaling task. This Exchange journaling task is going to be responsible for interfacing with the journal mailbox with the hidden message in it, and working with whatever policy information is stored in that hidden message. Also, as a reminder, all of the tasks in an Enterprise Vault environment are going to be controlled by the Task Controller service. Now, that is going to pass the information on to the storage service on the Enterprise Vault server. That storage service is then going to pass that information and store it as one of the .dv file extensions. And we talked about the different types of the files that we're going to have stored back in the mailbox. So it's going to have the same types of files. It'll have a DVS, shared part, and a converted content part as well. And of course, it will have to make entries in the Vault Store database about the information that has been stored in a particular Vault Store. Now, we'll talk about here in a moment the concepts of creating the journal archive and determining which vault store that we want to associate with the journal mailbox. But not only do we want to store the information that's in this journal mailbox, but we also want to have the ability to index that information. So again, the storage service will notify the indexing service that if there's information available for indexing, the indexing service will find the information it needs in the vault store database and retrieve the per user part, the shared parts, and the converted content that the storage service created, and it will index all that information and store it in the index for the journal. And again, we'll talk about exactly what information is stored as part of that index when we get into the indexing lesson later in the course. Now, for the Enterprise Vault environment and how we're going to handle a Exchange 2007 or Exchange 2010 envelope message, and again, envelope messaging and standard journaling are equivalent for the 2007-2010 environment. So the first thing that we're going to do is the recipient list will be extracted from the envelope message. Any uncategorized recipient will be classified as undisclosed. We will then make a copy of the message and pass that to any external filter that is going to be used as part of the journal archiving process. And we'll be looking at an example of one of those external filters a little later in the course or in the lesson. Then it will take the envelope itself and store it as a stream in a message save set. And when we say message save set, that's going to be a DVS type of a file extension. And then the journaling task will copy anything that failed to be able to be archived into an envelope called the failed to journal folder. And we'll look a little bit more about how it responds to that particular process a little bit later in the lesson. Now, if we start looking at the Exchange 2010, in Exchange 2010, we added in the capability of encrypting messages using the Microsoft's Rights Management Service. So therefore, if we're going to be able to index this information, we've got to be able to decrypt those messages as they get placed into the journal mailbox, and then from the point of moving it from the journal mailbox into our journal archive. So what happens is that when you're setting it up in conjunction with the Rights Management Service, you have an option of setting up what's called a clear text copy of anything that has been protected using the RMS or the Rights Management Service. And this will give you the capability of passing that information on into the storage service, which means that we can then store that particular item. And once we've stored that particular item in clear text, we can then index that information, which will give us the capability of searching it with utilities such as the Discovery Accelerator and the Compliance Accelerator. And where you set this up, it's going to be part of the Exchange journaling policy on the Advanced section. And we'll look at an Exchange journaling policy a little bit later in the lesson. And the property that you're going to set is the clear text copies of the Rights Management Service protected items. Some strategy for archiving the journal mailboxes. The Exchange journaling task can process one or more target journal mailboxes. It will delete the original item after archiving. Now this is where we start to move away from the mailbox archiving environment, where we wanted to make sure that we had a copy of that particular item before we archive the mailbox, which was called that remove safety copies. Typically in a journal environment, if I'm going to be archiving all the items that are in a journal mailbox, I don't really need to save the original, so I'm going to delete that. Also means I'm not going to be routinely accessing this journal mailbox from viewing it from a user standpoint. I really don't want to create a shortcut, and it will archive all types of items. You don't go through and specify the message class for your journal archives like you did for the mailboxes. The new items in the journal mailboxes are archived immediately. It's technically not immediately. Every 60 seconds, the Exchange journal archiving task will check to see if there's anything available in the journal mailbox for archiving, and will archive it as soon as it determines that it's available. When you're configuring your Exchange journaling, before the Enterprise Vault Exchange journal task can be configured, the Exchange server must be configured to direct all of the mail to the journal mailboxes. Now again, that's kind of a generic question or a generic statement in that we're assuming that you do want to make sure that your journal archives everything in Exchange. But we'll go through and look at the fact that you can in fact set up more specific journaling for the Exchange 2007 and 2010 environments. So in Exchange 2003, this journaling is performed at the message store level, but for the Exchange 2007 and 2010, standard journaling will be performed on a specific mailbox database that is accessible from the Hub Transport server. But again, also if you do have the premium journaling available, you do have the capability of being and setting up more specific items to be journaled to the journal mailbox, which means that we have more specific items specified or dedicated to the journal archive. If you have a large enterprise where you have a lot of different Exchange servers that are doing journaling, you may actually want to look in your enterprise and vault environment and have dedicated enterprise vault servers dedicated to archiving these Exchange journal mailboxes. Now, for the enterprise vault that's working with the Exchange 2007 and 2010 environment, it did give you the capability of being more detailed about what exactly is being journaled, and we've kind of alluded to this up to this point. Inside your Exchange environment, you can set up selective journaling, and again, this is only available if you have the premium journaling client, which means you have the enterprise version of the Exchange server. You can also set up group journaling, which allows the selection of items based upon groups. You can set up custom filters. These custom filters will go through and look at different attributes that are available, and then based upon the attribute that's available, you'll determine whether or not you want to include this item in the journal mailbox or delete the item from the journal mailbox. And then you can also create custom properties. These are additional messaging application programming interface or MAPI properties that can be indexed by your enterprise vault environment. To implement the custom filters and the custom properties, typically this involves support from Symantec or a Symantec partner professional service to help you make sure that the filter is in fact getting exactly what you want. We do have the ability with the Enterprise Vault 10 product to use the data classification services, and this data classification services has the ability to discard unwanted items so that they're not stored in the journal archive. For example, an organization can choose to discard items that meet a specific policy definition as long as they do not trigger other policies. Alternately, your data classification services can force discard an item, which means that it is deleted immediately regardless of any other policy that it triggers. Now, all of this is configured as part of the data classification service component in the Enterprise Vault, which we do not cover in this particular course. We want to show you an example of a filtering environment that goes along with the journaling process. Typically, if you are using the Compliance Accelerator product to determine if you are compliant with either industry or company policies, you're going to install what's called the Journaling Connector. The Journaling Connector is an example of one of these custom filters. So you can see that everything that goes through the Enterprise Vault journaling task, which could be instant messaging or Exchange messages, and again, you do have to have additional configuration options to be able to do journaling of the instant messages. But those items go through or pass from the journal mailbox through the Enterprise Vault journaling task, and then before they're actually archived or used in the Compliance Accelerator environment, they're passed through this custom filter called the Journaling Connector. The Journaling Connector will be responsible for communicating with the Enterprise Vault Directory Service to determine where the Compliance Accelerator database is that is associated with this particular item. It will then assign a department to that particular message, and then based upon the policies that are configured inside of the Compliance Accelerator, determine what it needs to do with that particular item. It will either place it in a Compliance Accelerator database so that the Compliance Accelerator service can then retrieve that item and make it available for review. Because again, you can set up a reviewing process inside of Compliance Accelerator to review the items that have been captured based upon the Journaling Connector and the policies that you have set up in Compliance Accelerator. And we talked a little bit more about what Compliance Accelerator does in the introduction lesson. Then, of course, once it's gone through that custom filter, it'll go through the regular storage and indexing service to be placed in the journal archive based upon the Vault Store group, Vault Store, and Vault Store partition that we have assigned to the journal archive. So since we're going to look at that, we've gone through and talked about the basic concepts of the Exchange journaling piece of the puzzle and a little bit about how that's interacting with the Enterprise Vault environment. Let's go through and look at how we have to set up or configure the Exchange journaling within Enterprise Vault. So the basic process is to choose a journaling vault store, create the Enterprise Vault Exchange Journal archives, then create the Exchange journaling task. Then we're going to create the Enterprise Vault Exchange journaling policy. And again, this is going to be similar to the mailbox policies that we had done for the Exchange mailboxes, but we have a separate policy just for Exchange journals. And then we can create one or more Exchange journal targets. As we mentioned earlier, an individual Exchange journaling task does in fact support multiple Exchange journal targets. So the first issue that comes up is the selection of a vault store for the journal archive. So we can use a common vault store, which means that it's going to be used with the mailboxes. This gives you the capability of having a single collection and migration strategy for both the user and journal mailbox. Also, it is, though, a single point of failure. If that particular vault store is not available, not only have you lost the capability of doing your mailbox archiving, but also your journal mailbox archiving. You may want to consider setting up a dedicated vault store and not sharing anything within that dedicated vault store. This does give you the capability to differentiate the collection and migration policies between your mailbox and your journal. Also, you can set up different storage requirements based upon compliance. And we do know that the journal archives are going to be much bigger typically than the individual mailbox archives. So we do have to make allowances as far as for storage for that. There's going to be much less user interaction with a journal archive than there is for a user's mailbox. So therefore, the policies that we have will require a lot less of that. And then also there may be different funding as far as supporting the mailbox archiving process versus the business needs for compliance and discovery and supporting the journal archive. However, we can also go ahead and decide that we want to have a dedicated vault store for journaling, but we still want to be able to share that with the vault stores that are associated with the mailboxes. And we talked about in the lesson that dealt with the sharing levels of setting up the sharing within the group option. And the benefits there is that we gain single instance storage between both the journal and the mailboxes, as well as that deduplication process within the single instance storage. The non-shareable parts will still be stored in their own vault store, though. But some considerations that may be in play here is when I am doing searching and retrieval, the message may require retrieval from multiple different vault stores, and you need to verify that you do have good connectivity between the vault stores and the vault store partitions to have acceptable connection and sharing. And we already talked about that when we talked about doing a connectivity test as part of setting up the sharing in an earlier lesson. So to manage the journal archives, some best practices. When we're looking at mailbox stores and partitions, we can typically live with maybe a little bit bigger of a partition. However, because we know we're going to be putting a lot of items in the journal archives, we may want to go and set up a much smaller individual partition to help us with achieving a shorter backup and restore time. So in this example here, we've closed that big long partition because we decided to go with these individual smaller ones. And because we are adding a lot of items into the journal archive, we do want to be able to periodically have it automatically roll over. And we talked a little bit about setting up that partition rollover earlier when we were talking about configuring the vault storage. So because of that, we should be able to automatically roll it over, close that smaller partition, and again, for that smaller partition, the items aren't going to be changing very much, so therefore we don't have to back it up as often. And now we have a new open partition in the vault store with a new ready partition for when that particular vault store partition fills up. So how do I create this journal archive? You go into the Enterprise Vault Administration Console, you navigate from your directory to your site down to the Archives node, and you'll notice that we have a separate archiving node for the Exchange mailbox, which we looked at in the mailbox lessons, but now we're talking about the Exchange journal, so we're going to go to the Exchange journal location by itself. The Exchange journal archives are not created automatically like they were created automatically for the Exchange mailbox section. So we'll go to right-click and say New Archive. We'll go through the wizard to create the archive, and some of the settings that you're going to specify is going to be the vault store. And again, we talked about the considerations for which vault store to choose. You're also going to specify the indexing level. and we'll talk in more detail about the indexing lesson in lesson 11, but we have the two different indexing levels, brief and full. Typically, if you're doing journaling, you're going to be doing compliance and discovery, so you really want to have the indexing level set to full to give you the complete search capabilities that are available with full indexing. Also, you need to specify the billing account, and again, realize that this has to do if you are charging for storage, that the journal archive is going to probably take up a lot more storage because it's going to have many more items in it. So you can specify that as well. The next thing that you need to do as part of creating the journal archive is determine who's going to have access to the journal archive. And you set this up through the permissions on the journal archive object. Typically for the Vault Store Service account, it really only needs to have read permission on the journal archive. The journal mailbox account itself, and you will have created a journal mailbox account on the Exchange server in order to have a journal mailbox. They need to have write access. And then for anybody else, they're only going to need no access. So you shouldn't really let anybody other than the journal mailbox and the Vault Service account have access to the journal archive. Once you've created the journal archive, you can go and create the Exchange journaling task. If you try to create the Exchange journaling task prior to creating the archive, you will get a pop-up warning that tells you that you have to have a Exchange journal archive available before you can create an Exchange journaling task. Again, you go to, in this case, through the directory to the site level, and then down to the Enterprise Vault Servers node. Then you expand the individual Enterprise Vault server that you wish to install the Exchange journaling task on. In this case here, the actual alias is the EV server alias. And you go to the task section and select that you wish to create a new Exchange journaling task, and then go through the wizard for setting up the startup type, which can be automatic, manual, or disabled, and that's the same as the properties that were available in the mailbox item. In this particular example here, we're showing you the properties associated with an Exchange journaling task for an Enterprise Vault server named Server 1. And on the General tab, you can see we have the name, and you can specify the startup type, including whether or not you wish to run in report mode. Maybe when you're initially setting it up and starting the testing process, you may just want to see what would be archived from the journal mailbox before you actually start the archiving process. And we've seen with the mailbox archiving how to run it in report mode, so this is similar as well. You also have the ability to set up a policy associated with the journal archiving task, or associated with the journal archiving task. This is going to be showing you the Advanced tab of a default Exchange journaling policy. Now, on this particular policy, you can see the different settings that are available, and these do show the default settings. For example, here it shows the failed distribution list expansion behavior, and if it cannot expand the distribution list, it will move that item to the failed distribution list expansion folder. For more details on the individual settings and what their values can do for you, you can use the Enterprise Vault Administration Console help, and also you can get that from the Administrator's Guide as well. To add a journaling archiving target, you go through the Enterprise Vault Administration Console from your directory down to your site, and then under your targets node. And in this case here, we're looking at the Exchange environment. So under our Exchange, we'll have our domain that we defined and the Exchange servers that we define. And then for an individual Exchange server, in this example here, one named Server 1, you will see that there'll be an option to define the journal mailboxes. Once again, you can define an individual or multiple journaling archiving targets to an individual journal archiving task. So we right-click, say New Journal Mailbox, and once we specify the name of the journal mailbox, it will show up in the list of targets. Next thing that you do want to do periodically with the journal mailboxes is to be able to synchronize them with the journal archives. And this is typically going to occur just like with the mailbox archives whenever you make an archiving policy change or you've modified the folder settings in Outlook for the Exchange journal mailbox. Also, if you need to, you can in fact monitor the process of the archiving or the journal archive by opening up the Outlook environment and connecting to the journal mailbox. And what you want to do is you want to verify that there's nothing in there. If there is something in there, you should only have to wait approximately 60 seconds for the system to check to see if there's anything in the journal mailbox, and then approximately 5 minutes to actually delete the items from within that journal mailbox once they have been archived. In this lesson, we identified the working mechanism for the journal archiving and looking at the various different Exchange journaling options. We also learned how to configure the journal archiving using the Enterprise Vault Administration Console. Our reference materials include the Administration Console Help, the Installing and Configuring Guide, the Setting Up the Exchange Server Archiving Guide, and the Administrator's Guide. And that brings us to the end of Lesson 10.